Alrighty, we are back. Are you with us, Adam?
Yeah, I'm right here.
Perfect.
I had to find the mute button.
That's always the one that tricks us. Cool. Okay, so for session 2, we have Adam Meltzer with the ConfigMgr product group. Maybe do you want to just give a quick background how long you've been working, at Microsoft? Maybe some of the areas that you've focused in with Config Manager.
Oh yeah, sure. I've been with Microsoft in total since 1997. Started as a contractor, went on full time in 1998. I've been working with Configuration Manager specifically since 2006. My very first shipping release of Configuration Manager was back then it was SMS 2007 Beta 1 before it became Configuration Manager. So back then I worked on the fallback status point and the NAP functionality that's long since been deprecated. So those were some of my first things I worked on there. As far as kind of focus areas throughout the product, I tend to focus more on what we call breadth areas. So kind of those wide swaths of functionality that cover a whole bunch of different things. So like the client framework, so that's like the CCM exec process and the plumbing and the management point, and also worked on some SDK pieces, some of the PowerShell commandlets, some tools and automation, and most recently I've been spending a lot of time working on our new cloud services that we have that are backing things like tenant attach and desktop analytics to a lesser extent. So.
Awesome, super cool. Do you want to go ahead and see if you can share your desktop and see if I can get that sent live, and then we can just go from there, and it's all you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, I'm sure I want to share. Thank you, teams. Let's see. All right, let me know if you guys can see my screen.
Yeah, looks good.
Okay, cool. I've got a couple of quick slides, and then the rest is all demo. And feel free to interrupt me if there's, oh, hey, that's not what I want. Let's switch that to the other way. Any questions or whatever, just let me know and I'll be happy to answer them. So today I'm mostly talking about Support Center. If you have not ever used or heard of the tool, then this is perfect for you because I'm going to talk all about it. And even if you have, there's been quite a few updates and changes in both 2107 and 2103 that I'll talk about as well. So hopefully you'll also learn something new if you're already familiar with Support Center. So the About Me slide, I've already kind of gone through all that, but if you need to get a hold of me, I am not super active on the socials, but you can find me on Twitter at Adam Meltzer, and you can look at my ancient blog back when we had MSDN blogs, aka.ms/ameltzer. Probably a lot of the content's missing because that's what happened when they migrated my blog over. So if there's anything that's in there that looks interesting that's linked to that's dead, you could always use the Wayback Machine to find it. So moving on, as I said before, today I'll be talking about Support Center and Toolkit tools to a lesser extent outside Support Center, and then some of the new stuff that's in Support Center for 2107. Also, there's been some new stuff in 2103 that you might not know about as well. So just a real quick breakdown of what Support Center is. It was originally released, I think, back in 2016 as a separate tool that you get on the Download Center. It's now actually more integrated with the product, so it's actually on what we call the media. So on the install directory under SMS Setup Tool Support Center, or under Tool Support Center, after you actually install it. The original thought behind it was we had two purposes. The first was we wanted to update and consolidate a lot of our existing one-off tools that we had. So tools that you may have used before or heard of called Policy Spy, and of course CMTrace, which I'm sure every one of you has used. Also there's a tool called Client Spy that looks at things like inventory and package deployments, and SendSched, which is meant to send scheduled tasks to the client. So like when you click a button in the control panel to update hardware inventory or to send DDR device data records, that's also actually sending what are called client schedules in the back end. We have a tool for that. And then another tool called Deployment Monitor that's used to look at your updates and applications and configuration items and such that are deployed to your computer and to diagnose those. So wanted to take all these client-centric tools that we have and kind of merge them into one sort of Uber tool that has everything you need to troubleshoot the client. There's no real server-side functionality in Support Center today, and I'll talk more about that later and sort of what our future vision is for that, because I know it has been a long time request that people are like, oh great, I can use this tool to troubleshoot stuff on my clients. So what about my MPs? What about my DPs? What about my sites and everything? So I'll talk more about that a little bit later. And then finally, the second sort of overall functionality we want to have in this tool is we wanted to make it easier for IT pros and also for our support team to have sort of a one-stop shopping for launch this tool, click these 3 checkboxes or whatever, and we will get you a standardized package of here's all the log files that you might be interested in. Here's a snapshot of your client's registry and your WMI, and then here's a tool that you can use to view that. So that was the other piece of that. So trying to solve a whole bunch of problems in one tool is what we're doing here. So that's pretty much all the exposition I have here. So let's just get right into the demo here. Just bear with me for 1 second here. I'll switch to my RDC man. For those who don't know, sysinternals just released a new version of Remote Desktop Connection Manager about a month ago. That purports to fix all the old issues with the old one that caused it to get pulled from download centers. So if you use this tool like I do, I highly recommend downloading the latest version. Doesn't look all that different, but supposedly has a bunch of fixes under the hood, so that's all good. So really quickly, I talked about the toolkit and the tools, and I'll share where they are once my site loads here. So I've got an installed site here, and here's the install directory, and then their tools, and then under the tools, there's a whole bunch of stuff in here. So we used to ship something back in the day called the Configuration Manager Toolkit. The last shipping version we have is specific to Configuration Manager 2012, calendar year 2012. We took all those tools and we actually moved them as part of the media. And the reason why we did that is so we can actually update the tools really quickly. And by virtue of installing the latest version, you'll always have the most up-to-date tools. So several things that you may have had to download separately in the past, you just get for free now when you install the site. So if you look under client tools here, you see all these tools here. These are ones I talked about before. We try to take some of the critical pieces of functionality in all these tools here and put those in the support center. And there's also server tools. We don't have any of these in Support Center today. These are mostly focused around content management. So you can do things with these tools like look at the single instance content store, migrate a distribution from one machine to another, look at the content distribution jobs in your DP. So there's quite a few interesting things there. And these are all things we've also shipped in the past in the toolkit. I just thought I'd point those out. And then we've got Support Center here, and to install it on a machine, you just launch the MSI and you install it like any other Windows installer. The Support Center tools will work remotely, so you can install them on one machine and they can connect to another machine. You just have to have trusted access, so an administrator to have the account on that machine. But this is a caveat, not all functionality supported when you connect remotely. There's a few things that we need to actually have local access to the machine to do some things on it. Those things will be disabled when you do that. One other thing, since I'm here on the site server, that might be kind of interesting is that that data collection feature I talked about in Support Center. One feature we shipped starting in 1910 is that you can go to a machine, you've got a client on, you can right click on it, and we have this new button here called Client Diagnostics. And we have a few different things here. You can enable, disable verbose logging, and you can also do something called collect client logs. And what that'll actually do is that will actually reach out to the client machine, and we have the Support Center engines, so the underlying pieces of Support Center that handle data collection, and we'll actually use that to collect the client logs. And then you can go into Resource Explorer, and we've got a new button here called Diagnostic Files. And you can actually go there and you can see the log files we collected, and you can actually view it in Support Center's viewer application. So you don't have to install anything to get this. This is all just built in to Configuration Manager now. So here's a log file that's collected, and double click on it, and then you can view it. So that's a pretty cool feature. It can make it a lot easier to do some troubleshooting on a client machine without ever having to connect to that client machine to get those log files. So moving on, I will talk about, there's 4 major pieces of Support Center. There's the client tools, which is the application that I was describing earlier. That's sort of the union of all these different older client-facing tools. There's the data collector tool, which is specifically for collecting packages of data. There's a log viewer tool, which is meant originally to be a replacement for CMTrace, and then there's a new log viewer tool called OneTrace. One of the original criticisms that we had for the log viewer that we shipped with Support Center originally is it was too basic and people wanted more advanced functionalities. So we wrote something called OneTrace that's meant to be a very powerful, more advanced log viewer, and these are all things I'll describe. If you've used Support Center in the past, the client tools piece and the data collector were all combined into one tool, one giant tool. And in, I think it was 2103, we split them into 2 separate tools because we kind of came to a realization that the tools is getting entirely too bloated. So to make things a little bit more separated, we separate those into 2 tools, but they work exactly the same as before. All right, so I'm switching this machine here, and I'm just going to walk through the Support Center client tools. So you can launch this on a client machine. I just have this launched on my local machine here, and I'll walk through some of the things here that you have. So the first thing here is you've got a basic view of your client's settings. This is pretty much equivalent to what you see in the control panel applet, but it's all right here, and it'll show your site code, your registration status, and your version, your client ID. And then a new thing that we added back in 2010, I think, or maybe 2103, is you can now view your maintenance windows as well. This is something that we had in the deployment monitoring tool that we've since put into Support Centers. So right here, you can see that this is the next window that's coming up, and then you can see all the upcoming windows. And the icon will tell you if you're actively in a maintenance window. You can ignore the business hours. That's a special one. And then another thing you could do here is you can control the client service. You can restart the client if you want to from here. The next view we have, this is a policy view. This is meant to replace and update the old Policy Spy tool. What you can see here is you can actually look through all your client policy that you have on your machine, and you can click on one of these. And one thing you can do that's kind of interesting, this is super advanced, but some of you might do this, is you can actually take that policy, you can copy it as what's called a local policy muff, and then you can paste that in a notepad. You can actually do something with it. And what you can use the local policy for is actually forcefully overriding the client's policy without having to request policy for the management point. So this will always supersede that. So there's some advanced cases where you might need to do that for certain things. And this will make it a little bit easier to get a template for modifying those MOF files without having to code them by hand. And we'll show you all your different policy views. We've got your requested policy, your actual policy, your default policy. And like with the Policy Spy tool, you can request your policy from here, and you can even reset defaults if you really need to. And then we have a view here where you can actually see the activity in the policy system itself. So right here, I can request policy and it sees that was requested, but I don't have any new policies here. I preloaded this last night just to get some data here where I'm actually requesting policy, and you can see it getting the policy and applying that. You can see all the attributes and everything there. So this is all stuff that Policy Spy has had that's now built into the Support Center client tools.
Quick question for you, Adam.
Yes.
What's the difference between actual and requested and default?
Oh, that's a great question. So default policy, these are the policies that come preloaded on your client. So when the client gets installed, it will set forth a set of baseline policy, not like a configuration item baseline, but just a baseline to the client of the minimum stuff that needs to get going. And these are all generated by the client installers. These will be things like the templates for like how to contact a management point, built-in sort of client framework bits. So like it'll make sure like the inventory pieces of the client are set up and configured and stuff like that. Now, the requested policy is the temporary holding place for policy. So when you request policy, it doesn't get evaluated immediately. It gets it all, it puts it all in this place called requested, and then a component kicks in called policy evaluator that actually puts it from requested into actual. So when it's in requested, it'll do things like reconcile revocations and new policies and all that, deletions, and then it all goes into actual. In old versions of Configuration Manager, that evaluation task could happen several minutes after the request task, and then I think starting in 2007 or 2012 releases, we made that basically one kind of atomic thing, so it's been a lot faster. So the requested and actual are less of a big deal than they used to be in the past, but that whole system remains, so we kept that in place here. But that's what those the three different views are. And if you're using Policy Spy, you'll see those same things, and that's what they mean.
Yeah, that's super helpful. One other one from a attendee. I think the answer is probably no, at least for Support Center. But the question is, can we use these tools while a machine is not connected to the company network? Example, home network.
Unless you are actually on that machine. So if you're using like remote desktop or something like Splash Top or whatever, you can run this tool and use it, but you can't use it remotely. You have to have some sort of access, network access to the machine to be able to get to it.
Cool. What about the collect logs feature? Would that be able to work through like a CMG, for example?
Yes, collect logs features can work with a CMG. This uses the fast channel, aka BGB channel. So we actually have bits of Support Center on the client itself. We don't have the full suite because we didn't want to really bloat the client MSI too much, but we do have the minimum piece to make this work. So the console will actually stage a BGB message to go through the MP to the client, which will then kick off the Support Center engine to bundle up all the log files, and then it actually uses the same channel we use for file collections to send that zip file up to the management point, and then it gets processed, and that's how it ends up here in Resource Explorer. So that will work for internet connected clients or CMG connected clients. As long as that client can talk to a management point, then this whole flow should work. The only time this flow wouldn't work is if we do have a size limit on the collection. So I think it's 100 megs. So if you collect like 500 megs of log files, then that won't work. But I would hope that in most cases that wouldn't be a normal thing.
Adam, how long would you say that log collection takes?
The log collection should be fairly quick. I mean, obviously it depends on the size of the log files you're collecting and the speed of your hard disk and everything. But I mean, it should be, the actual bundling of the log files should be fast. Just taking all those log files and zipping them up, and then it uploads to the file collection endpoint on the management point using bits. And then the management point can send it up to the site server pretty fast. So on a fast network, it should only take a couple minutes for it to show up. On a slow network, it could take longer. You kind of network speed dependent at that point. But in most circumstances, it should be really, really quick.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. All right, so moving on, there's actually some new stuff here. We have this tab called the Content tab, and a lot of this is new for 2103 and 2107. So what this tab here has everything you need to know about content on your client. This particular view here used to be called Content also. We changed deployments because really what this view is showing you are the deployments on your system, is not so much as the actual content. So we need it to be clear. So one thing we did is before we only showed you applications and programs and updates that were actually installed, and we changed this around a little bit so we could show you everything that's targeted at your system. And we also added a whole bunch of information about updates deployments that weren't there before. So these things were visible in the deployment monitoring tool. So we try to take that functionality in the deployment monitoring tool and put that in here. So as an example here, I've got an update and I can see all the properties for that deployment. I can actually see the policy for it, and this will show me all the actual updates. These are all synthetic updates that are part of that deployment package, and then even look at the CIs if I wanted to. And then there's another tab here called reporting where I can see the actual status of that. So I can see here that this was evaluated successfully, and then the compliance state's not compliant because these are all synthetic updates that I haven't installed yet. So this is all brand new here. I'll also show you baselines, and we'll show you settings and such have been deployed. So that's all brand new. We also show you programs that are targeted. This is very interesting. This is just a kind of a view of the WMI, underlying WMI instance for this. And then we have a view here where we can see applications that are targeted to your systems. So here I've got one that's not installed. I just deployed CMPivot, then here's one that is installed. Now here's a feature that you may use Support Center, but you may not be aware of, is that for applications specifically, we have this button here called Verify or Download. And when you click on that, what it will do is it'll reach out to the distribution point or points. I just have one because this is my lab machine here. And you can actually click on that. You can see the content that the DP is presenting. And then you can even take that content and you can download it using bits and put it in some folder here. And then it'll go through and it'll download it. Now that's pretty cool, I think. And one thing I want to note about this is that all of this is happening completely outside of the client itself. The only thing we're using the client for is to get the client's certificate. All the actual communication with the distribution point and even the downloads are all happening completely outside the client infrastructure itself. And the reason why this could be useful is if you're trying to troubleshoot a content problem with a distribution point, if things here display and work as expected, then you can rule out the distribution point as being a problem. So, and plus I think it's kind of cool that you can just use this to get stuff from the distribution point directly if you're trying to test all that. So that's all old, but that's not a really well-known feature. And then this updates and baselines, that's all new. And then you can install or uninstall just like you can through Software Center. You can do all that through here as well. The next view we have here is we have a cache explorer. Here I've only got a few things in my cache here, but you can see your cache folders, you can see the size, and you can just click on those folders and actually look at the content that's in there. And you can do the thing. You can do the things you can do in your client control panel. You can change the cache location or the cache size. And one thing you can't do in the client control panel that you could do here is you can actually clear the cache as well if you want to. The next view we have here is a monitoring view. I've pre-populated this just to demonstrate what's in here. When you turn this on, you can actually watch the content system in the client do its thing, or specifically the configuration item system. So that's used by updates and applications. So what I did here is I requested the installation of an application here, and you could see in real time as that's happening when this is turned on, is that you could see it going through all the different statuses and the different steps of getting the configuration item and doing the evaluation and enforcement. And so you could see all the different state message IDs and everything, and it'll try to translate those something human readable for all these guys here as well. So this could be useful for troubleshooting certain content scenarios. Then we have this all updates view. This is something that was in deployment monitoring tool that we have in here as well. Unlike the deployments view, these are all the updates that the system knows about and its status. So this is a little bit different. These are deployments has targeted updates, and these are just all the updates that are potentially available according to the internal Windows Update component. So you can see here I got a couple that are installed, and I've got these huge bunch of synthetic updates that are all missing because I haven't actually installed them or anything. And then finally, we got this invoke trigger button here where you can do a whole bunch of different things here for the client or the content systems of the client. So most of these things are available in the client control panel. There's a couple that aren't, like refresh management points and content locations, but you've got all these things here. This next view isn't super interesting, but I'll just run through it anyway. In the tool called Client Spy that I described earlier, one of the things you had was the ability to inspect your inventory subsystem. So you could look at just quickly, just kind of going through these because these aren't super interesting, but you could see all the software inventory and hardware inventory rules that are enabled and what you're collecting for DDRs. I don't have any. Oh, I do have file collection enabled, so you can see what files are being collected. I don't have any IDMFs here, but if you did, that would be on there. And then got a couple of metering rules here, and you can see all those as well. So this is just a useful, a much faster way to sort of explore the inventory configuration than having to go through, look at policy or policy spy and kind of grovel through all those different WMI classes. It's all just right there front and center.
Okay, quick question for you, Adam.
Yes.
So the question was, how long are the logs saved on the MP, or do we need to manually delete those? So can you go into maybe some detail of where those zip files get stored for the logs and like how that cleanup occurs?
Yeah, sure, I can do that. So the log files actually get stored, they get staged on the MP, but they get stored on the site server. And this is exactly the same as it is for log files as it is for collected files through software inventory, with one notable exception. And once this is going really slow, we do have a maintenance task specific to, I can, once this is waking up here, I can show that to you all. So we do have a maintenance task specific to that. Okay, I'll have to find that. I don't want to derail this too much. We do have a maintenance task that you can use that will clear the collected files for log files after a certain period of time. I think it's 30 days by default. I'd have to double check to be sure. After I'm done, I will look into that and I will put that into the chat once I know. But yes, we do clear that after a certain amount of time. It doesn't just stick around forever.
Awesome, thank you.
Sure, no problem. All right, next view we have here is we have a view here called Troubleshooting tab. This will run some automated troubleshooting steps in the client. We've just got a few things here today. We'll do some checks in Active Directory to like check that an MP is published and stuff like that. Mine's showing up as warning. I don't know why I have to look into that, but we'll also try to get like MP certificate and list information. We'll run some networking tests. We'll try to request policy, and we'll also do a synthetic registration to the management point. And like with the content download stuff that I showed off before, this is all completely outside of the client. So if these things all turn green, then that means most likely at a very basic level your client's working. If anything's a red, that means your client's probably in trouble. And you can actually double click on any one of these and you can look through the log and get more information about what it's actually doing. And finally, for the client tools, we have this built-in log viewer. This is similar to CMTrace. You open log files, it'll show your log files. A couple cool things we have here that you don't have in CMTrace is that we'll try to highlight error codes that we know about, and you can actually click on those and get the error codes directly. So that can prevent having to type them in somewhere if you want to. We do have an error lookup, so you could type in something there, and then we'll tell you what it means. We also have a concept called quick filters. So you click the quick filter button here, and they can type in some text here, and it will filter it on the fly for you. So this could be a little bit faster than having to use more advanced filters, which we do support. We give you include filters, exclude filters, and highlight filters, which are all pretty self-explanatory. We also have the ability through here is you can quickly configure client logging. So if you want to enable like verbose logging and debug logging, you can just click that right here and you can change that. You can also change your file size, your max file size, and your max file count. So that's all right there for you. Another thing we have is a concept called log groups. So we have some pre-populated groups here for a few different scenarios. And you can just click on one of those. I'll just click on inventory because that's where my mouse cursor was. And then we'll use a built-in list of files, and we will automatically open all those files for you in one view so you can look through those. And like if you're troubleshooting inventory, we have all those log files open, and they'll all be sorted by time and everything. So this is the older log viewer that I was talking about. We have a newer log viewer called OneTrace that I'll demonstrate later, and that's sort of building the next generation advanced user experience based on this on the logging engine that's used here. All right, I'm going to move on to data collector. I don't have too much to show here because this is pretty simple. So this used to be part of the used to be combined with the client tools is one tool called the Support Center Collector. Now the data collector is its own standalone tool. We do have links to the other tools you can launch through here if you want to, but at its core, this is just a single purpose tool here. So you run this on a client machine, or you can connect to a remote machine if you want to. We give you a set of different collectors. These two here we require, but you could do things like collect log files, policy, WMI. Look at the list here yourself. We have Windows Update log files. If you're on Windows 10, we'll collect all the ETL files as well if you have that enabled. And then you just check your stuff, and then you run it, and it'll go through and it'll collect everything, and we'll put it in a zip file that you can view. I'm just going to cancel this here to watch this go. So once you have that zip file, you can either view it on that machine you're on, or you can put it on a different machine, or give it to an IT pro or somebody else to look at, or even someone in Microsoft support. And there's a tool called the Support Center Viewer. And you take that zip file and you load it here. I've preloaded it to prevent, because it could take a while for it to load. I've enabled everything on here when I collected it before, so I'll just step these tabs really quickly. So the first tab here, we have the configuration tab. This is just like the main Support Center view. You see all the same stuff here. We've got a few other things here. You can look at information about the operating system, the computer. This is all just a dump from WMI, and it's just presented for you in a central place. Look at the services that are installed, and you can click through those and see what the service configuration is. And we'll also show you network adapters as well. Yes.
You've got a few questions actually that I think might be kind of good, because I think you've sparked interest and people didn't know that a lot of the components of this tool existed. It looks like there's some curiosity around user deployments, which I'm going to guess it does not show them based on how the methods have to get called. But user-based deployments, do they show up?
I am just about positive that they do.
Really?
Yeah. It should show all deployments. So this is completely unscripted here. So let me just look on my machine here. So
can you invoke one?
Yeah. So this is my my Microsoft IT managed machine here, and I've got a whole bunch of deployments here. I think these are all user-based deployments here. And if I launch Support Center on my machine, I should have it installed on here. It's probably going to be a really old build, but let me just launch this on here really quickly. And then I'll look at the content view here, and got a whole lot of stuff on here. So this should show everything. These should be user deployed and machine deployed. So as long as it's deployed as long as it shows up in your policy, and user or machine policy, as long as it shows up in Software Center, we should see it here as well. If there's anything in here that you're not seeing it, you're expecting to see, I was going to talk about this later, but I might as well talk about it now. Please use the smile button here and do send a frown and describe the issue you're seeing and what's missing. I promise this is not a black hole when you use this feature. Everything that goes in here is actually looked at by a human, and we do take those feedback very seriously. So you should see everything in there. If you don't, please let us know. That is not expected.
And then, well, yep, go ahead.
Oh no, the next one I was going to do was the ports. I assume it's probably like the WMI ports. Is that what you're using to connect remotely? Are there any additional ports?
Yeah, we're using WMI for pretty much everything on here. There, so there are a few features that are not supported remotely, but for those features that are supported remotely, we use WMI. I'd have to double check. I think for the log collection, we probably use SMB for that. It's been a while. I'll have to double check that, but.
And then I think another bit was, what about the CIs and baselines, seeing and evaluating baselines, seeing the status? Is that part of the tool?
It is, yes. So we do, that's probably more interesting on my actual real desktop here, but yeah, we will show you baselines. It's view only right now. So you can't actually interact with it other than just seeing it, but you can look them over and you can see the different properties and everything for them. So like with updates, you can see the actual deployment properties. You can see the actual CI policy document and the name, and you can see the actual reporting on it. So here, this one was successfully evaluated.
Nice.
So yeah, we do have some basic functionality for baselines today, and this shows us that now. But we'll also show settings, CIs. So we'll try to show you all the different. I mean, most stuff in the client today around deployments are actually based on configuration items. So updates and applications. The only thing in here that's not are package programs, because that came before configuration items. But if it's a configuration item based feature, you should be able to see it in here. And depending on what it is, you'll have more or less functionality. But we're trying to add more stuff as we continue to work on this.
Here's another interesting one for you. Is there a way to collect the troubleshooting zip info without Support Center to allow the user to send it to a support specialist? So I think the question's kind of like, would there ever be a feature like maybe in console, like collect logs to get the full troubleshooting file, or is Support Center the only way?
Yeah, that's a great question. So today, the only way to get those log files, specifically log files, is to either run the Support Center tool, which requires administrator rights today to do, or to go through the console and use the client diagnostic action in there. Kind of my sort of utopian vision for the future is that Support Center as a product basically goes away completely. What I really want to see is like, you go into the console, you right click on a client, you say, I want to do all the stuff you could do in Support Center, but it all just happens natively through the whole infrastructure. So you need to launch a separate tool to do that. And expanding on that even further, what I really want to see in the future is that you can do the same thing with servers as well. So you've got a problem with a management point or a distribution point or even a site server, you could just click on that machine in the console and say, I want to collect all the logs, or I want to run these troubleshooting steps on it. So that's kind of where we want to go, is we want this to all just be in the console. But as of where we are today, that's the limitations are as I described earlier. So you have to have high rights to run this tool on a machine. That is actually something that we want to fix in the future. Is we want to give you the ability to launch the Support Center collector as a low rights user, and at least let you run things that may not require high rights to do. So certain log file collection wouldn't require, may not require, I should say, administrator, and some other WMI stuff may not require administrator. So we would like to make this a little bit less restrictive in some of what it can do to make it more flexible.
Cool. So I think that ties into another one. Is there an RBAC template relevant? I assume based on that comment, it's just local admin would be what you need to run Support Center, either locally or remotely.
Yes.
Okay.
You need to have some sort of admin rights on that machine for it to work.
Cool. Okay, go ahead. I think we've got most of the questions.
Excellent. Let's see here. So just the rest of these are pretty simple. So these are all the log files I've collected. Like with the like with what I showed for the diagnostic viewer in the console, you just double click on it and you can view that log file. If you collected debug dumps, you can see them here. This is more of an advanced feature. You could use this if, say, you're noticing a memory leak or something in the client or one of our WMI providers. You could just have it collect a snapshot of all those, and you could export those in a dump file and send those to support, or if someone in the product group asks for that, that's an easy way to get it. This is a dump of everything in the root CCM and SimV2 SMS namespace WMI. Just like with before, you can browse them. You can copy them as local moff or copy them as regular moff. We've got a registry explorer. We look at the CCM and SMS and CCM setup keys. Don't ask why there's two versions here. That's just a bug that we'll fix in the future. This policy view is just like the one we looked at before. It's just a static read-only version of what was there. You can look at all the different policy namespaces here, requested and actual and user policy and machine policy and all that. This view here, what we'll do is we'll export the certificates. These are the public keys only. We don't export the private keys, but you could just quickly look at these. You're trying to figure out a problem with your client certificates, and you can double click on them and view all those properties. And then finally, you can see that if it did a troubleshooting collection, if you have that troubleshooting checkbox enabled, we'll show you the results of that, and you can click through it and view all the information on that. So that's the collector and the viewer. One thing we are working on for a future release is to have a similar type of UX user experience to this, but have something more server-centric. So you could run this on a management plan distribution point and say, yeah, I want to collect information for insert site role here, and then it would do a similar thing where it would automatically collect all the stuff, and then you'd get a zip file that you could look at and you could investigate further. Not built into the console yet, but that's, like I mentioned before, that's really where I see this going in the future, and I hope that we can actually get there. All right, so let's talk about log files. Some of you might have heard on Twitter that we've had a couple of improvements to CMTrace, and I wanted to show those really quickly. To do that, I'm just going to launch a version of CMTrace here. This is an old version. I think this is 1707. It's a pretty old 1706, maybe. It's a pretty old version. But to be honest, CMTrace really hasn't had much love in quite a while. So this should be a pretty similar experience to what you'd see in a newer version as well. So I'm just going to take this file here, the CCM SDK provider.log. It's about 5 megs, so not super big. And I'm going to put this in the CMTrace here. And as you can see, this is taking a really long time to load. It's absolutely killing my CPU here, probably spiking one of the cores completely. It looks like it's freezing up. Yes, it's not responding right there, and it's just kind of sitting there. So I'm going to show you something pretty cool. There, finally finished. So this is the latest version of CMTrace. This is probably not the absolute latest version, but this is 2107 build here. Take that exact same log file, and I'm going to put it in here, and you don't need a stopwatch to see that loaded a lot faster. One other feature is that we now have find next and find previous shortcuts. So let me just type text here. So you can now do F3 to go forward, Shift F3 to go backwards. So this should make finding stuff in log files a lot simpler than it was before. The old days had to go to the find and do direction up or down, and it was really annoying. So some improvements here to CMTrace, look forward to in 2107. And one thing I wanted to note that some might not know is that starting, I think it was 1906, perhaps, maybe a little bit earlier, but I know a lot of people have like package programs to deploy CMTrace onto machines. Starting with a few releases ago, you no longer need to do that. In fact, please don't do that. We actually have CMTrace on every single client machine and every single management point. So it's just right there in the Windows CCM directory. CMTrace, come on. You know why it's not there? It's because I moved to my desktop, but it's there on every single client and management point, and it's always the most up-to-date version. And one other thing is that it's the architecture specific version. So the CMTrace 32 actually launches a 32-bit process, and then it takes a copy of the 64-bit version and copies to a temp directory, and it runs it. That causes some people's antivirus to be unhappy because you've got code extracting and launching another executable. We don't have that problem anymore. So the takeaway, latest version, always run the client in MP. You don't need to have any other tasks to get it installed on there because it's always right there for you. And please check out the 2107 version because it's a lot faster now than it used to be. And it has some nice features. So let's talk about OneTrace. OneTrace is our brand new, well not brand new, but it's been out for a few releases now, but it's our sort of our next generation log viewers. So I'm just gonna show you a few cool things you can do here. So you can see here kind of off the bat, it looks quite a bit different. I'm just going to take this SCCM SDK provider and copy it into here, and I'll show you kind of what it looks like. So like CMTrace, it's pretty quick, or the new version of CMTrace is pretty quick, but it's got quite a few other features that are really useful. So right here, you notice that there's actually a hints bar now. So this will tell you where there's warnings and errors in the log files. So this could be a really quick way at a glance to see where there's potential areas of interest in the log file. You know, this log file isn't super interesting. Let me open up a different one. I'll open up the CCM messaging.log. And you'll notice that as it's loading, it's actually merging these into one view. And now I've got a couple of error messages here that I can look at as well. And you can mouse over them, but you can see those, and you can click on them, and you can go right to them. So this is all pretty useful. We've got a recently opened view, so you can see log files that you recently opened them. They recently opened in the past. You just double click on them and just merge those into your view. And we also have a view here called Open Files. What you can do is if you have several files open in a view, you can see what files are there, and then say, I only want to see the CCM messaging.log. I could just uncheck these guys and see only CCM messaging.log, and I can just check these guys and turn them right back on. They're all loaded in memory, so it's really quick. So another thing you can do here is we actually support tabs. So I can take another log file and I can open this in a second tab here and just switch between these different views here, which can be pretty useful. Or another thing you can do is you can actually take this and you can drag it and you can create a side-by-side view if you want to. In fact, you can really kind of customize this UI a lot. You may have noticed I was switching a lot between open files and recently opened, and that's kind of annoying. So I can just take this here and I can just look into both at the same time. So this is very similar to like Visual Studio. It's if you've used that before, where you could basically move these things around. You can make these floating windows if you want to. You can show them. You can hide them. You could really make this your own. Another thing we have here is like with the old log viewer, we've got a quick filter, so I can just type in something here and it will filter that text on the fly.
For the
demo, yes.
For the error log lines, is that specifically based on like the text containing the word error, or is it based on like something within the text where an output of a component like said this is an error?
It's actually based on there's metadata in the actual log line itself. So there's actually a copy unformatted log line here. This will actually show you the raw log entry. And for our different log formats, we actually embed a certain ID in there that tells you like this is type 0. This means information log file. So to actually tell it how to render that. CMTrace uses that, but also it'll look for text like failed and error and a few other things to try to discover things that might be warnings. Usually it doesn't get it right, but we actually use the metadata in the logline itself. So yeah, so quick filters. We also support the the highlights, includes, excludes, and you can even make filter sets as well. So if you have something that you like say you want to highlight your stuff in all kinds of garish colors, and you can do that here. And those things will all be reflected in the hints bar here as well. So I can see all stuff that I highlighted is green. Had a few other log files here, but those aren't matching those strings, and you can quickly remove those as well. So we try to make it really easy to slice and dice log files here. Here's another cool feature. Say I want to group stuff by status. I can actually take this column and drag it in this area up here. And let me just minimize this. Now I've got everything grouped conveniently by status. Or say I've got multiple log files here. I'm just open another one here. I want to group by that component. I can also do nested things here as well. So now I've got status, informational, and then group by the different components. And say I just want to swap these guys around, I can do that as well. That's going by component status. So you can even do thread IDs. So thread ID can be really useful when you're trying to trace things across different log files, especially for applications, which can span a whole bunch of different log files and be a real pain to troubleshoot. So you could group by thread to help make those things a little bit easier. And in the older log viewer, we had a concept called log groups. We have that here as well. So we've got a few ones that are built in. I'll just choose application management. So that's talking about that. We'll put all the log files here in the list, and then you can take an individual one and you can open it, or you could do open all, and it'll just open everything in the same view there for you. A couple other neat features. Say you've got a section of logs that you think are interesting. You can actually bookmark those. Just go to an arbitrary point here and bookmark these, and then you can actually go forward and backwards between your different bookmarks. And just like with bookmarks with error messages, we have the ability to quickly jump between different groups of error messages forwards and backwards. And another thing that people have noted that's problematic is in Windows 10, you might have noticed that we no longer have plain text log files for Windows Update, and that can make it a real pain to consume. OneTrace can actually take those ETL log files and directly consume them. So you can see it's actually loading this side by side. Let me just turn these guys off here. And here's the log file for Windows Update run with all the different cool stuff you had before. So the error highlighting and all the different text, and you can do all the component grouping and all that other stuff as well. So this can make it considerably easier to troubleshoot Windows Update issues when you're using Windows 10 and Server 2016 and newer. Finally, this is new for 2107. First thing is we changed from we changed this to a fixed width font. We use Consoles, and we give you the ability to customize it further. So if you really want to view your log files in Comic Sans 16 or whatever, then cool, you do you, and you can do that if you want. So that's OneTrace. Please try it out. Tell us what you think of it. Just like with other Support Center stuff, if you find something you don't like, use the frown button in the top right corner. Find something that's broken, let us know.
Yes, we have quite a few really good questions in the chat for you, Adam. So yes. OneTrace, new product, or is it already built into the CCM package like CMTrace? So if you're on a client, would you be able to launch this, or is it something that would have to be pushed out?
This is part of Support Center, not part of the client. So you'd have to push out Support Center to your machines. And unfortunately, this is not just a single executable. It's got quite a few pieces to it. One thing that is in our backlog is to make OneTrace and the other Support Center tools, make them a click once deployment to make it much easier to deploy, so you have to worry about MSIs and everything. So that's something we do have in the pipeline because it can be a pain to get that stuff deployed out there. So we do want to make that easier.
So would that be just a pre-created application in ConfigMan? So
yes, you'd have to create an application or a package deployment for this. We don't have it today.
But when you said to create I think this ties into another question. So any plans of including Support Center as part of the client, or at least a pre-created app? Is that what you were referring to, maybe in the future having it pre-created?
Pre-created app,
for Edge.
absolutely. Yeah, we'd like to do a pre-created app for it, and we'd also like to make it a click once, so so you don't even have to deploy it. You can just launch it from a share for a website and just get the latest version. So
Awesome.
so making this simpler to deploy and get out to machines is something that we are interested in doing. The reason why we don't want to deploy it with the client itself is because it does bloat the client quite a bit. I think the full Support Center package adds about 15 megabytes to the client MSI, and that might not sound a lot, but that adds up pretty quickly when you're deploying to tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of machines. So we're trying to limit that as much as possible. I'm happy to take other questions. I'm basically done with my demo.
So there was one earlier that said, I'm having a hard time finding it, but it basically was asking, is there any way to see what Support Center is doing on the back end, like the WMI classes that it's querying, for example, when it's collecting things or querying things from a client?
Sure. So we don't really have much logging in Support Center, but what we do have is there is some way to see what's actually collecting here, and we document this as well. So this isn't anything super secret. Here we go. So there's a config file. Open this in Notepad here. And we actually have some settings here. You can see the different things here that's collecting and what it's ignoring, and same with registry keys. So if you have some custom needs that you need here, you can see not only what it is collecting, but you can customize this to get some additional things as well. So and like I said before, this is all documented. This isn't anything super secret. So we do support changing this. So this is the kind of thing where if you did have a deployment like an application, you could deploy Support Center, install it, and they could drop in this custom .config file with your own custom stuff in it as well. And anything any changes you make here, so additional namespaces or registry keys and subkeys, those will all just show up automatically in the viewer tools. So you don't need to do anything special to see those today. I hope that answers that question.
Okay, is there a standalone media version of OneTrace? Or is
there
it,
is not.
Okay.
Yeah, there is not today. Definitely, you want, send us a frown, say, hey, I want that, and that's something we can look into, because there's no technical reason we couldn't do that. We just haven't done it.
Okay, cool. Does Support Center perform any type of like WMI repair or troubleshooting, or policy initiation?
So for policy, like policy initiation, I'm not quite sure what that means, but I will recap what we do have in policy today. So we don't do any WMI repair. That's something you have to do on your own. That can be dangerous. So that's something we'd rather not take the risk of doing ourselves. But for policy itself, we do allow you to request and evaluate, or just request just evaluate, or you can even reset your policy to a default state. These are all things that we had in the old Policy Spy tool that we also have here in Support Center as well. So we do give you some minor maintenance stuff that you can do for policy. A reset policy is the big hammer that you only want to reserve for worst case scenarios, but it is air quotes a safe thing to do. Once you do that, the client will just will have to re-request policy, and the client will feel like it was a brand new client at that point.
Cool. One more question. This person is asking recommendation to collect logs from client if the user is on a home network. I assume it would just be use the right-click feature assuming you're using something like Cloud Management Gateway or IBCM.
Yes, that would be the way to do it. Sorry, I just lost connection to my remote desktop here. My VPN probably went down. Yeah, that's the way to do it. Is to right click on the client and to do right click, do client diagnostics, and collect client logs. That is the way to do it, because as long as the client can talk to a management point, this feature will be able to work. That's the only prerequisite for that, versus the other support center stuff that requires you to actually have some direct network connectivity to that machine.
Yeah, just browsing through here. I think we've got most of the big ones here around your session.
Cool. I'll take a look at the questions afterward as well and see if there's anything that I can answer them. So
cool. Yeah. So I mean, we're also at the top of the hour. So yeah, we'll do like a 3-4 minute pause just for a restroom break. Sounds like Adam's going to stick around for any questions in the chat. So if there's any new ones coming in, he'll be able to kind of chime in there. That session, the demo was awesome. Thanks so much for joining and showing the group all the tips with Support Center, Adam.
Yeah, no problem. I hope you all found this educational and useful. And like I said before, please try the stuff out and send us feedback if there's anything you don't like. We actually do review that. So
cool. Okay,
we'll start.
Yeah, we'll start a 3-minute timer, and then the last session is going to be a Q&A with Brian Mason. We're expecting it to be probably a bit shorter, maybe like a 20-30 minute session, just talking about MMS questions. So I'll go ahead and start this timer, and we'll meet back here in about 3 minutes.